Welcome to Starbound. My name's Chikondi, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Frerin and Rimiki. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now let's get into today's story. No warning shots were in the plans of the Axiom's Dawn's crew as they made their way toward what was supposed to be a routine mission, replacing the human delegation on planet Evenir. It was meant to be a standard relief operation, bringing home a tired diplomatic team, likely sick of alien food and eager to return. But midway through their hyperjump, the crew received grim news. A coup had taken place, and the humans were now hostages of the new regime. The message was brief, the only thing the comms could manage under the strain of FTL travel. Captain Adam Reeves, a regular unmodified human from Earth, stood at the center of the bridge, watching the hyperspace corridor blur past the viewports as his senior staff assembled around the strategy table. The blue-white streaks of compressed space-time cast shining shadows across their faces, each expression revealing a different reaction to the news. He'd called this meeting knowing full well what would happen. His crew would fracture along predictable lines, each faction certain that their approach was the only reasonable response to the crisis. "Captain!" The voice that broke the tense silence was cold and utterly devoid of doubt. Weapons Officer Cerberus Kane stepped forward from the shadows near the tactical station, his appearance as meticulously controlled as his tone. Not a single strand of his jet-black hair deviated from its prescribed position, swept back in the severe style favored by the high human colonies. His uniform bore no wrinkles, no signs of the 16-hour shift they'd all just pulled. Even under the harsh bridge lighting, his genetically perfected features showed no fatigue, no stress, only the calculating assessment of a predator evaluating prey. Adam knew what was coming before Cerberus even opened his mouth again. The high humans of the Apex colonies had been engineered for war, their genetic modifications emphasizing tactical thinking, physical perfection, and most troublingly, a disturbing lack of empathy for those they deemed inferior, which, in Cerberus's case, included virtually everyone not born from one of the many human lineages. "The solution is obvious," Cerberus continued, his pale eyes sweeping across the assembled officers. "Evenir has committed an act of war by taking our delegation hostage. The appropriate response is the complete annihilation of their planetary defense grid, followed by selective orbital bombardment of their major population centers. We have the firepower. The Axiom's Dawn carries enough fusion warheads to reduce their primitive civilization to gas particles. It would send a clear message to every other species in this filthy galaxy. Touch Earth's people and burn."
"You can't be serious."
Second-in-command Liara Jones' voice cut through the tactical officer's proposal like a plasma torch through hull plating. She pushed off from where she'd been leaning against the navigation console, her movement carrying the distinctive grace of someone raised in low gravity. The lunar colonies had produced their own breed of modified humans, adapted for life on the moon. Though her enhancements were subtler than Cerberus's aggressive perfection, they showed in the fluid way she moved, in the slight elongation of her limbs, and the way her blonde hair seemed to float around her shoulders as if perpetually suspended in lighter gravity. A single dark beauty mark beside her right eye drew attention to her face as she fixed Cerberus with a look of undisguised disgust.
"We're talking about hundreds of human lives, diplomats and their families who signed up to build bridges, not become martyrs to your twisted vision of human supremacy, and your first instinct is genocide?"
"Not genocide," Cerberus corrected with infuriating calm. "A strategic demonstration. The Evenarians have proven themselves unworthy of diplomatic engagement. They've shown their true nature, duplicitous, opportunistic, willing to use people as bargaining chips. Such behavior requires correction."
"Wrong! Wrong!"
Liara's voice rose an octave.
"Listen to yourself. You're talking about murdering potentially billions of sentient beings because their government which just took power in a coup, mind you, is holding our people. We don't even know what the situation on the ground is. For all we know, half the planet opposes this new regime.
Irrelevant, Cerberus dismissed with a wave of his hand. They failed to maintain stable governance. They allowed extremists to take power. The consequences
should be diplomatic and focused on actually rescuing our people!
Liara slammed her palm on the strategy table, causing the virtual display of Evanir to flicker.
We go in weapons hot, start glassing cities, and what do you think happens to our delegation? They'll be dead before the first warhead detonates.
Adam watched the exchange in silence, noting how the rest of the bridge crew began to gravitate toward one side or the other. This was always how it went, the fundamental divide between those who saw humanity's expansion into the galaxy as a conquest and those who viewed it as a community to be built. Navigator Vinny Agarwal was the first to formally pick a side, stepping up beside Lara. The young officer's dark eyes blazed with conviction as she faced down Cerberus.
Commander Jones is right. We have treaties for hostage situations, and none of them involve planetary bombardment. We should focus on talking to them, determine the new government's demands, and negotiate. That's why we have a diplomatic corps in the first place.
Are you serious? Cerberus's lip curled in what might have been a smile on a face capable of genuine emotion. Negotiate with terrorists who've already proven they'll use our people as shields? How charmingly naive. Tell me, Navigator Apprentice, how many successful negotiations have you conducted with species that view humans as walking bargaining chips? Before Vinny could respond, Chief Engineer Amy Okonkwo's voice rumbled from near the engineering station.
Cerberus has a point.
The massive woman crossed arms that could bend steel plating without mechanical assistance, one of the more practical genetic modifications from the heavy world colonies.
We've seen this pattern before. Show weakness in the face of aggression, and every 2-bit revolutionary in the galaxy starts thinking humans make good hostages. Sometimes you need to remind them why Earth controls the most powerful fleet in known space.
Earth controls that fleet just because we use it judiciously, Communications Officer Marcos de la Cruz interjected, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by grave concern. Our strength comes from being trusted as mediators, as fair dealers. Start glassing planets every time someone takes hostages, and watch how quickly that trust evaporates. We'll be fighting wars on a dozen fronts within a year.
Better to fight wars we choose than to be picked apart by opportunists, Amy countered.
Science Officer Hikaru Tanaka, who had been silently reviewing data streams at his station, finally looked up. His augmented eyes, a mesh of organic tissue and artificial cells, whirred softly as they focused. I've been analyzing everything we know about Evanir's recent history. The previous government maintained stable relations with Earth for 37 years. Even before that, they were one of our first successful first contact scenarios. This coup appears to have been led by a military faction calling itself the Pure Evanir Movement. Their stated goal is to expel all alien influence from their world.
Xenophobic nationalists,
Liara said.
All the more reason to approach carefully. If we validate their propaganda about humans being violent conquerors, we'll only strengthen their position.
The debate raged for several minutes before finally stalling, the room dividing into 2 clear factions, Liara, Vinny, and Marcos on one side, Amy and Cerberus on the other. In the middle stood the captain, caught between them as an uneasy silence settled over the room. Eventually, the neutral Hikaru glanced around the room, his eyes lingering on each face, some tense, others uncertain, before he finally drew a breath and spoke. Captain, I should note that our FTL communication array won't be able to establish a clear connection with Earth Command for at least 12 hours. This region is too distant. It makes real-time consultation impossible. Whatever decision we make, we'll be making it alone. The weight of that statement settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. Adam could see it in their faces, the sudden realization that they couldn't punt this decision up the chain of command. There would be no admirals to defer to, No Earth Council to provide guidance. Just them, the Axiom's Dawn, and whatever choice they made in the next few hours. The debate fractured along predictable lines. Liara argued for patience. Cerberus cut her off, explaining that military coups didn't wait for the patient. The air on the bridge grew thick with tension. Through the viewports, hyperspace continued its endless stream, each second bringing them closer to a decision. Adam stood still in the center of the bridge and watched the factions solidify. Cerberus, Amy, and surprisingly, 2 of the junior tactical officers had gravitated toward the aggressive response. Liara, Marcus, Vinny, and most of the science team stood firmly in the diplomatic camp. Hikaru remained somewhat neutral, feeding data to both sides without explicitly endorsing either approach. The captain himself remained silent, processing not just the arguments but the implications. The Axiom's Dawn was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of Earth's reach into the galaxy. Armed with weapons that could sterilize worlds but were rarely used, it embodied humanity's dual nature among the stars. Every decision made here would ripple outward, shaping how 100 species viewed humanity.
Captain,
one of the junior officers finally spoke up.
With respect, we need your input. The situation on Evanir could be deteriorating while we debate. Shouldn't you say something?
Adam held up a hand, silencing the young woman. He'd been waiting for this, for his crew to fully articulate their positions, to lay bare the fundamental tensions that ran through not just this ship, but all of human space. The divide between the conquerors and the diplomats, the warriors and the builders, those who saw alien species as threats to be managed, and those who saw them as neighbors to be embraced. "The next mission," he finally spoke, his voice cutting through the brewing arguments. "Has anyone considered our next mission?" The question seemed to catch them off guard. Hikaru was the first to respond.
"The Agricultural Advisory Team to Cinere. They are currently in cryosleep in Cargo Bay 3. We are supposed to deliver them in 8 days.
8 days, Adam repeated, assuming we resolve this situation quickly. But if we go in weapons hot, start a war with Evanir, what will happen to our passengers?
A valid concern,
Cerberus admitted, though his tone suggested he found it largely irrelevant.
But we can't worry about some frozen alien scientists when...
The debate continued to swirl, but Adam's attention was elsewhere. The hyperspace corridor twisted around the Axiom's Dawn like a dying thing. Blue-white streams of compressed reality bent inward, colors that existed only between dimensions pulsing with violent intensity. Adam felt the translation coming in his bones, that subsonic thrum that meant they were about to punch back into normal space.
"Translation in 10,
Hikaru announced. The streams collapsed. Reality snapped back like a rubber band, and suddenly Evanir filled their viewports. The planet was almost obscene in its beauty. Purple and gold clouds wrapped around jade-silver oceans, an atmosphere that seemed to glow with its own inner fire. But Adam's eyes found the moon, that ugly yellow rock, pocked with craters, orbiting its jewel of a world like a forgotten afterthought. Several hundred humans down there, maybe dead already, maybe not. The bridge erupted with reports, hostile frequencies, encrypted military channels, words like purification bleeding through the AI's voice. Adam barely heard them. He studied that moon, an idea forming like ice crystals in a vacuum. "The main cannon," he said, interrupting another argument between the two factions and drawing every gaze toward himself. Amy's response was immediate.
"It's been 3 years since it was last fired. It has never been tested at full yield."
Her puzzled eyes revealed her uncertainty about which faction the captain had just aligned with. Adam stood and walked to the viewport. The yellow moon hung there, innocent. On Evanir, children probably wished on it. Lovers met under its light. It had done nothing wrong except orbit a world in crisis. Perfect. He could feel his crew's eyes on him. Cerberus radiating cold approval at the mere mention of the weapon. Liara's growing alarm, the others choosing sides. They wanted him to pick. Genocide or diplomacy. Strength or weakness. fear or trust? Why not both? No life on that moon. No life on the nearby planets either, Adam said, his reflection ghost-like in the viewport. No atmosphere. Nothing but rock and gravity. But they are all visible from Evanir. He turned to face them, the decision crystallizing him. Behind him, the moon waited. Prepare the main cannon for maximum yield. Target the dead center of that moon. His voice carried the weight of history being written. We're going to send a few messages they can't ignore. We could turn their world to glass, but we choose not to. A stunned silence fell over the bridge, thick and immediate. Then, a slow, shared understanding rippled through the crew. A wolfish grin, the first genuine expression of approval Adam had ever seen from him, spread across Cerberus's face. Across from him, Liara's look of horror melted into astonished respect, a reluctant smile touching her own lips as she saw the brutal genius of the plan. The captain hadn't chosen a side. He had forged a new one from the heart of their conflict. The argument was over, replaced by a singular, terrifying purpose, and on the faces of the once divided officers, a collective, chilling smile bloomed. All stations, prepare for a weapons test, Adam commanded, returning to his chair for the first time in a while. Let's show the pure Evanir movement exactly what Earth thinks of hostage-takers. The countdown began. On the surface of the planet below, Hitsar sat on what just days ago used to be the royal throne, the ancient seat of power, carved from a single block of hard stone and inlaid with veins of jade, seemed to tremble with the weight of 10,000 years of unbroken rule, a rule he had shattered just 72 hours ago. His gray-skinned fingers traced the armrests where the old queen's hands had rested for decades, feeling the smooth depressions worn by generations of monarchs. The throne room itself was a perfect example of Evanir's ancient glory. Walls of stone so old they predated recorded history rose 40 meters to a vaulted ceiling, their surfaces studded with green gemstones of various sizes. The gems weren't merely decorative. Each one had been placed according to star charts from the founding of the First Dynasty, creating a map of the heavens as they had appeared to Evanir's earliest astronomers. Candles burned in silver sconces along the walls, their specially treated wicks releasing not just light, but a scent that triggered deep satisfaction in Evanirian olfactory receptors. The pure Evanir's movement's leadership had arranged themselves in a loose semicircle before the throne. Unlike the formality of the old court, they sat cross-legged on cushions stolen from the royal apartments, their weapons within easy reach. Along the far wall, 24 soldiers in mismatched armor kept their pulse rifles trained on a huddled group of off-world diplomats. The aliens stood with their various appendages raised in what passed for surrender across a dozen species. Among them, looking pale and exhausted, was the lead human diplomat. Antonel? Antonig? Something with an A. Hitsar had heard the name once during the initial capture and promptly forgotten it. Humans all looked alike to him anyway, pink and soft, like larvae before their final molt. You should have seen their faces, Umik was saying, his black eyes reflecting the candlelight like pools of oil. The military commander of the revolution sat closest to the throne, his gray skin still bearing the dark bruises from the fighting 3 days ago. When we breached the diplomatic quota, the Rigelian ambassador actually tried to invoke diplomatic immunity, as if words on paper mean anything when the people rise up. Samir laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed off the ancient stones. The revolution's chief propagandist had lost an eye in the fighting, and the crude bandage wrapped around his head gave him a piratical air. The old order loved their papers, their treaties, their money. They spent so long talking to aliens they forgot what it means to be a Venerian, to be ourselves. Papers have their uses, Hitsar replied, leaning back in the throne that still didn't quite feel like his. The execution orders, for instance. The people need to see justice done properly. Not mob violence, but revolutionary justice. Clean, organized, televised. The scaffolds are already being built in the main square, Umek reported. The engineers say they can accommodate 15 at a time. We'll start with the Queen's inner circle, then the collaborators. Then, he gestured toward the diplomats with his rifle, the alien infiltrators and their sympathizers. The Centauri delegation is demanding to speak with their homeworld, Samir noted. They keep insisting their government will pay ransom for their safe return. Let them demand, Hitsar said. Their governments will learn soon enough that the pure Evenair movement doesn't negotiate with alien powers. We are reclaiming our world, our destiny. Every alien ship that lands here, every cultural exchange, every trade agreement, they are all chains around our people's necks, no more. What about the human? Umek asked, nodding toward the pink-skinned figure among the hostages. They are the most dangerous. Their fleet is days away at best, Hitsar interrupted. And they are soft. They'll negotiate first, send diplomats, try to understand our position. By the time they realize we're serious, we'll have fortified the entire system with the toys we found in the old royal arsenal. The mood in the throne room was almost festive. They had done the impossible, overthrown a dynasty that had ruled for millennia, captured the aliens who had been slowly corrupting their world, and declared Evenair for Evenarians alone. The soldiers along the wall shared quiet jokes. Someone had found the royal wine stores, and bottles were being passed around, though Hitsar had forbidden outright drunkenness. They were revolutionaries, not barbarians. The public executions should begin tomorrow, Samir suggested. The people are eager for justice. They've waited. The massive doors to the throne room burst open with such force that one of them cracked against the wall. A soldier stumbled through, his gray face flushed purple with exertion, his black eyes wide with something that looked disturbingly like terror. The festive atmosphere shattered like glass. Weapons swung toward the door before recognition set in. The soldier, young, barely past his first molt, dropped to one knee, gasping for air. Supreme Leader, he managed between gulps of air. Defense room. Gravity waves detected. Massive displacement. Hitsar rose from the throne, his contentment evaporating. Speak clearly, soldier. What happened? A ship, Supreme Leader. Huge. It just appeared. In high orbit. The gravity wave nearly tore apart our monitoring satellites. Umek was on his feet, rifle in hand. What faction? Royal Loyalists? The Southern Territories were never fully... No, Evenarian! The soldier interrupted, an unforgivable breach of protocol that showed just how rattled he was. Alien! The signature! The defense room says it's human! The throne room fell silent except for the crackle of candle flames. Along the wall, the hostage diplomats stirred, hope flickering in their alien eyes. The human, Antonel or Antoning or whatever, actually smiled. How? Samir asked. The nearest human fleet is in the Brinix system. Even at maximum burn, they couldn't. Hyperspace. Umek said quietly. They must have been closer than we thought. Or they've improved their FTL tech. Hitsar forced himself to remain calm, to project the strength his followers needed. One ship. They probably diverted a courier or a light cruiser that was nearby. Have they made demands? The soldier shook his head, sweat beading on his gray skin. No, Supreme Leader. No communications at all. The defense room tried to establish contact, but... He swallowed hard. Nothing. They're not responding to any frequencies. Typical human arrogance, Samir spat. They think silence will intimidate us. But Hitsar saw the fear creeping into his commanders' faces. A ship that large, appearing without warning, maintaining communications silence. It couldn't be good. How large? Hitsar asked quietly.
The gravity displacement suggests... The soldier fumbled for words. Big!
One ship, Umik said, but his voice lacked conviction. Even a battle cruiser. We have the planetary defense grid, the orbital platforms, and we have hostages from a dozen species, including their own people. They wouldn't dare.
White light exploded through the windows. The ancient glass didn't shatter, but the light was wrong, all wrong. It was supposed to be night. Evanir's long rotation meant darkness would last another 6 hours, but this light was harsh, actinic, like someone had torn a piece of the sun and brought it down to the planet's surface. "Attack!" someone screamed. "The humans are attacking!" Soldiers scattered, diving for cover. The hostage diplomats dropped to the floor, covering their heads with whatever appendages they possessed. Hitsar found himself frozen on the throne, waiting for the explosion, the heat, the death that must surely follow such light. But nothing came. No explosion, no shockwave, no screaming alarms from the planetary defense grid. Just that terrible light, slowly fading but still bright enough to cast sharp shadows in the throne room. Hitsar was the first to move. He rushed to the nearest window, crunching across broken glass, his hands gripping the stone sill as he stared up at the night sky. The moon was wrong. Evanir's moon, that yellow disk that had watched over their world since before the first Evanirians crawled from the primordial seas, was broken. Half of it simply wasn't there anymore. The remaining half hung in space like a severed organ, its newly exposed face glowing white-hot from whatever force had cleaved it. Around it, a cloud of debris spread outward, massive chunks of rock the size of cities tumbling through space.
No,
Umik breathed beside him.
That's impossible.
But it wasn't impossible. It was there, hanging in the sky like a promise of doom. The humans hadn't attacked the planet. No, they'd done something different.
The defense grid didn't detect weapons fire,
Samir said, his voice hollow.
How could they? Without even... Supreme Leader!
Another soldier burst through the broken doors, then another, and another. The throne room began filling with panicked military personnel, all bearing the same impossible news. "The third planet, Irgus, it's gone! The observation posts report total fragmentation!" "The second one is breaking apart! The auto mining stations are transmitting mayday signals!" Hitsar stood at the window, watching the ruined moon as report after report crashed over him. The humans weren't attacking Evanir itself. They were destroying every other body in the system, turning planets and moons into rubble with weapons that the defense grid couldn't even detect until after they'd fired.
"We have to get to the observation room,"
Umik said, grabbing Hitsar's arm.
"We need to see what's happening. Coordinate a response."
"Response?" Hitsar laughed, high and hysterical.
"What response? They are destroying planets, Umik. Planets!"
But he let himself be dragged from the throne room through corridors filled with panicking soldiers and bureaucrats. The palace complex was in chaos. Some were fleeing for the bunkers, others standing frozen in hallways, staring at the walls as if they could see through them to the carnage in space above. The observation room was in the palace's highest tower, a dome of reinforced transparent material that had once been the old queen's private observatory. Now it served as the pure Evanir movement's strategic command center. Banks of monitors lined the walls, each showing feeds from satellites, orbital platforms, and ground-based telescopes. Every screen showed devastation. Irgus, the system's third planet, was simply gone. Where a world had orbited for billions of years, there was now an expanding cloud of superheated rock and metal. The feed from Mining Station 1 showed the asteroids of the belt being pulverized. One moment a nickel-iron asteroid the size of a small city, the next an expanding cloud of vapor. The seventh planet, a gas giant that had once sheltered the system's outer colonies, was collapsing in on itself, its atmosphere boiling away into space.
And through it all, the human ship sat somewhere around Evanir, silent and unmoving.
"They're not even targeting us," someone whispered. "They're destroying everything else, showing us they can."
The room erupted in panic. Commanders who had led the charge against the royal palace now scrambled over each other to reach the exits. Someone was screaming about evacuation ships, and, ironically, about seeking asylum on other planets. Another voice demanded the immediate release of the hostages. The carefully maintained discipline of the pure Evanir movement shattered like the throne room windows. "I'm leaving," Samir announced, backing toward the door. "My family has a ranch in the southern territories, far from any cities. Maybe if we disperse—" "You think geography matters?" Umik snarled. "They're destroying moons. What's a few thousand kilometers to weapons like that?" "Then what do we do?" Samir shot back. "Stand here and wait to die?" More officers fled, then soldiers. Within minutes, the observation room had emptied except for Hitsar and a handful of his most loyal followers. On the screens, the destruction continued. Hitsar stood in the center of the abandoned command center, watching his revolution crumble as surely as the planets on the screens. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd sacrificed, meaningless in the face of such power. The pure Evanir movement had planned for every contingency except this. An enemy that could casually destroy worlds and didn't even bother to communicate while doing it. "Supreme Leader," one of the remaining officers said quietly, "what are your orders?" Orders. As if orders meant anything when facing an enemy that used planets for target practice. But as Hitsar stared at the screens, at the human ship hanging silent and threatening above their world, a terrible clarity settled over him. There was no fighting this, no negotiating with it. There was only submission or annihilation. "Open a channel to the human ship," he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his insides. "Wide beam transmission. Make sure they can't miss it." "Supreme Leader." "Do it!" Hitsar snapped. Then, more quietly, "Transmit our unconditional surrender. Immediate release of all hostages. Full compliance with any and all demands. Make it clear that the pure Evanir movement no longer exists. The revolution is over." The officer's gray fingers flew over the communication console. "Transmission sent, Supreme Leader. All frequencies." They waited. Then, without warning, the main screen flickered to life. A human face appeared. Pink-skinned, dark-haired, wearing the crisp uniform of what Hitsar assumed was their military. The human looked tired, maybe even bored, as if destroying solar systems was routine work that barely warranted his attention. "This is Captain Adam Reeves of the Earthship Axiom's Dawn," the human said in accented but understandable Evanirian. "We accept your surrender. All hostages are to be delivered to the following coordinates immediately. Any deviation from these instructions will result in complications." "Why?" Hitsar found himself asking. "Why didn't you even try to negotiate? We could have—" "Negotiate?" The captain looked genuinely puzzled. "About what?" "The hostages, the diplomatic situation, the recognition of our government. Any of it. Instead, you just—" Hitsar gestured helplessly at the screens showing the ruins of their solar system. "Oh, that." Captain Reeves shrugged, actually shrugged, as if they were discussing weather patterns instead of destroyed worlds. "Those were warning shots. Target practice, really. It's been years since we've had a chance to test the main cannon at full yield. Your system had plenty of spare rocks. Don't worry, your species won't suffer from their loss. It's not like you were using most of them anyway." "Warning shots!" Hitsar's voice cracked. "You destroyed 4 planets as warning shots." 5, actually. We were about to hit that little ice ball at the edge of your system. Want to watch? The human's hand moved toward something off-screen. "No!" Hitzar almost screamed. "We've surrendered, unconditionally! The hostages are being released as we speak." "Excellent." The captain smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "See how easy that was? We didn't have to negotiate at all. That's really all we wanted. We depart to our next mission, and you stay here to solve your own mess." "But the hostages, you didn't even ask about them. Didn't try to establish communications." "Why would we?" Captain Reeves looked genuinely confused. "You took hostages. That was unacceptable. We demonstrated the price of such actions. You surrendered and released them. Simple, clean. Much better than all that space war or that boring negotiation, don't you think?" The screen went dark, leaving Hitzar staring at his own reflection in the black glass. Around him, the remaining monitors showed the continuing devastation of the Evenir system. The moon hung broken in the sky. Planets that had existed since the birth of their star were now expanding clouds of debris. And Hitzar finally understood the true price of his revolution. He'd thought he was playing politics, using hostages as bargaining chips, forcing the galaxy to recognize Evenir's strength. But the humans hadn't come to play politics. They'd come to deliver a lesson, written in shattered worlds and burning skies. And the lesson was simple. Don't touch Earth's diplomats. Hitzar sank to his knees in the empty observation room, watching the death of planets on a dozen screens. No one had died, but something intangible had been lost. As he thought of the books on their solar system that would have to be rewritten to teach children about the missing planets, he realized he had never been a revolutionary at all. He'd just been a fool.